Duncan McLellan.
Pastor Brian Stecker.
Did you take your pre-workout this morning? First question.
I did.
You did?
I did the last of it. So I'm out of the preferred pre-workout, and now I got to go to second tier tomorrow.
Yeah. You know, Josh has a pre-workout that's called the pre-workout. Yeah. Yeah. So I also took my pre-workout this morning, which means this podcast is officially sponsored by
the pre-workout.
The pre-workout.
Yeah. No, this morning, the morning workouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to.
You're not going to have a good podcast if you don't get your morning workouts in.
They need a resting heart rate of 120
in a nice Trinity mug.
For a podcast. That's what they teach you in podcast school.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of podcast school, you are hosting a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
welcome.
It's here it is. So the fun part was when you came in, and you've been here about a year, and you come in and pitch this idea of this podcast.
Yeah. What was your reaction?
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Right. Because we had known each other before you came here. And one of the things that stuck out in how many times did we interview you? Like once in Ankeny.
Oh, yes. If you go to that, you've got at least 4 interviews.
Like 4 hours of interviewing you.
Yeah.
So, and what stuck out in that, in the get to know you phase, you get the first impression rose after that. You get the, is your entrepreneurial spirit, right? So a lot of pastors get into churches and they're decent managers. They like to let's just do church and make incremental improvements, and let's find something we can explore. You have the entrepreneurial spirit of I want to try something like over there, but not like some random over there, but like I've done the research, I've looked at it, I've analyzed, I've done the work, and we need to be over there. And it was neat when you came in and said, I want to do a long form podcast on the intersection of Christianity and culture as part of my job. It's like, all right.
Let's see if he flinches.
Right. I mean, your other ideas of like taking elephants down and like rampaging other local buildings. This was one of the more
hit home runs.
This is one of the more well thought out ideas, and it was neat to be able to see your progression through developing the podcast, the work you put into it, the proposal you came up with, and how do you put together a podcast? What equipment do you buy? Who do you bring in as guests? How do you bring in as guests? And just watching you learn how to do a podcast, and on one lane, and the other lane is having a church, and Trinity's not like a local church of what's happening today. They're a traditional 160-year-old church, and to a person in the leadership team, church council, when they heard you explain it, they got behind it. It's like, it's not just me. Like, this is actually a good idea. And it's been neat to see, you putting together a guest list, travel itinerary, production assistant, and to watch this whole thing come together and now reach fruition. So you're sitting in your office doing pastor things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this idea pops into your head. You know what I need to do?
Yeah.
How did the idea for the podcast develop in the head of Brian Stecker?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things moved together. Partly was we had some staff restructuring. So my job got focused a little bit more on adult education. And part of it was I've engaged with other long form style podcasts, which is this style. So, I mean, this is going to be a 2.5 hour, 4 hour, no, probably 2.5 hour long conversation, right? And you pull clips out of there and all of that. So that's a style that's been proven. It's been proven to be by far, especially in that like 30 to 50 age range, by far people are engaging in that style the most. It seems to lend itself the most to the way people can process information the best. And I would attest to that for myself. So long story short, I'd probably explain it in a couple ways. Here'd be one way. This is probably the most just practical way. So my position for Trinity moved much more into adult education. So we've got a lot of in-person type Bible studies and such here. One data point that was intriguing to me was we brought in, I won't say his name, but he was a great speaker back in January. And he came in to give a beautiful presentation on Life Sunday. So he's talking about the issue of life. It's a very relevant issue. That time of year we highlighted and such. We got a pretty big church, 2,000 members or so. And we did not have many people there, right? not pointing blame at anybody. It's a Saturday morning on an unreasonable time, 8 to 2, something like that, right? But people got things going on Saturday morning. They've got family commitments, they've got sports, they've got other things. I can understand where someone says that's interesting, but I can't make it there, right? So what can we do to make the educational process at Trinity better? Well, we could do more in-person Bible studies, but I think we're hitting all the time slots that would reach people. We're covering a lot of different topics, so that doesn't seem to be a route. We could do more small group things, which we are doing. We've got somebody that, Tracy deals with small groups. So what could we do? Well, it would be really cool if we could what if we brought in 12 individuals to come in and do like keynote speeches at our church on the things that they are passionate, well-informed about, and they can just give a potent presentation. Okay, well, that's going to cost you a lot of money. And basically, whoever is able to make it to that time, Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, whatever time you set aside, only people that can make it there are going to be able to participate in that. 40 people, something like that. And then if you record that, it's not the way that people like to watch, and they don't want to watch a PowerPoint presentation where they can't really see the PowerPoint presentation and all. Like that just doesn't work really well. So what's another route? Well, this, right? What can we do? Well, over the course of a year, we could do 40 interviews with 40 individuals that could speak expertly on their areas that they're passionate about, that many of them have doctorates on. They can talk about that, and we can record it in such a way where everyone in our congregation has access to it, and they can listen to it when they're driving in the car, when they're working out, when they're cleaning up dishes at night. They can watch it at their own pace. So rather than 40 people, if we're optimistic, hopefully we can get, a third of our congregation to engage in these. And to whereas I've got a ceiling and you've got a ceiling, I can speak forever on C.S. Lewis, and there's going to be a lot of other areas that I can't speak expertly on. We're highlighting people at their absolute best. We're taking them where they're speaking expertly on their best subject. And what happens then for the individual in our church, just Trinity speaking or any other church, but for us, our primary concern is, of course, our own church. And are we ministering to them properly? From an adult education perspective, this is the best way to get great information in front of them in the way that they statistically engage the best way and process information in the best way, these kind of long-form discussions back and forth. And we can put 40 in front of them a year. So
we'll probably get into this later in the discussion, but you have in mind, it seems like two different users. One is the member of Trinity Waconia, right? Mm-hmm. We know them, we worship with them every week. You're their pastor. They hit subscribe because for the reasons you said. And then there's the person who hit subscribe for other reasons, right? Whether they're mm-hmm. a skeptic wanting to engage, at a deeper level, what's this Christianity? What do they think? Or people who are Christians who want to grow in their knowledge of different relevant areas, right? And probably a bunch of other categories. People who like your eyes, whatever.
Let's market that way, Ben.
Yeah. What is your goal for education at Trinity, and where does the podcast fit in? And I'm thinking in terms of just the overall discipleship of our people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking specifically at Trinity here.
Yeah.
Maybe I can put it this way. So, let me put it this way. So traditionally, the way that people have engaged media over the last 40 years or so, we're pretty ingrained in this. People are used to watching 7-minute segments on something. Okay, that's the way that CNN and Fox News and all the other news stations are structured, because they need their advertising space so they can have up to 7-minute sections. It gets smaller as the show period goes on. So for all of those who have watched Fox News, CNN, for the source of their information, just traditional media, they're getting bite-sized examples of a conversation. So I heard somebody giving an example. So this would just be an example of that. The border issue, right? Very complex issue. What plays into it? Well, you've got two different economies, U.S. economy, Mexican economy. Actually, you've got Southern American different economies, like all those different structures. You've got geopolitics between allies, geopolitics between not allies, because China plays a big role in this. You've got the families of these individuals who are trying to find, they're refugees, right? They're in a really difficult situation, coming out of a terrible place, looking for some kind of safe haven. You've got their story. You've got the story of the border agents. You've got the story of the people that live down there, the economic impacts the law itself and to what degree do you uphold the law in these situations. My point is, this is a very complex topic. And if you think that you can watch, even on a weekly basis, a little 5-minute snippet here, 5-minute snippet here, where somebody comes on and they're asked the question, they kind of just feed the answer really quickly because they only have 5 minutes. You're learning, you'll get a couple answers that you can regurgitate, but you're not actually learning to think through the issue at hand. What does it take to think through an issue like that? It probably takes a 2.5 hour long discussion, right? Where people can kind of hash things out and work through the intricacies and whatnot and learn that it's not a very easy black and white subject. There's a lot of things playing out, right? So what the long form style does is it allows people to, I think it resurrects the art of just thinking through a complex subject without just making a straw man, coming to a really quick conclusion and then saying, that's my team. I've got my answer. No. It's a complex thing. Learn to think. That's the real value. So I think that's what the long form does. So how does that apply then to our mission? We're not really going to be probably talking about border issues. Maybe that'll come up with some kind of guest, but we're going to be dealing with theological issues for the most part, the intersection of theology, Christianity, and then culture. Well, if the border crisis is complex, theology, which is the revelation of who God is, the very reality behind all things, that's going to be much more complex and much more multifaceted. And therefore, the question is there an issue that's taken root that we've inherited where the way that we go about dealing with theology is in 5-minute snippets or 2-minute snippets, or probably at the longest for most people, a 15-minute snippet or a 20-minute snippet, which is a sermon, which is also one-way dialogue, by the way. So the goal for this is, okay, you're a member at Trinity or you're outside of Trinity. We want to cultivate you into an honest, a rational, and a thoughtful Christian so that you can understand the complexities of Christianity, the answers that Christianity has, and the questions that Christianity poses to your life, and to think through those things in a deep and an honest way. And I think that this form, having 2.5 hour conversations on very potent issues within Christianity, that's a great way to cultivate your Christian faith and to help you put on a really Christian mind. So my hope is that people within our church, and then I hope it goes outside of our church, of course, but if a third of our church or half of our church were to engage in this on a regular basis, I think that they will be surprised at how quickly they grow in their Christian faith and just their theological understanding and their passion for it.
Mm-hmm. So that would kind of sounds like it would also be the goal for someone coming in not from our church, engaging with us, not someone who doesn't profess faith in Christ. This is what Christians think, right? We're not as simple as you may think, right? Mm-hmm. That it's a good defense of a worldview that has very deep roots, deeper than any secular worldview could even begin to think to have. What's your vision for or goal for the podcast in general? Where do you want to see this going, growing? What's your vision for that? Because right now we're in the church chapel, right? We're here. There's a couple of microphones. We got Bennett. You got a couple of trips lined up to go talk to some other people. That's day one. Where are we year 3?
Yeah. Well, we would need to get, I think, some unity, starting from the LCMS, but beyond the LCMS, right? Beyond our denomination, but certainly from within, to if we can use this as a place where the best minds can take the time to, once again, expertly speak on the areas that they can speak well about, right? If that happens, then I hope that within our synod, it creates a sense of unity where rather than, once again, because within a synod and within everything, infighting begins, right? And some of it's justified and you got to fight through things. Love the art of debate, and that's a necessary thing. Sometimes it also comes from straw manning, right? I don't understand the other person, but I'm going to kick at him from behind closed doors or on, in a closed social media conversation. That's very unhealthy. By bringing these kind of conversations and putting them before people, it's really hard to straw man someone who just spent 2.5 hours talking about what their thoughts are on a topic. Either they're going to put their foot in their mouth, or they're going to probably knock down some barriers that someone else is thinking. So I do hope it becomes a unifying factor in the LCMS. Now, if it does that tangibly, where does this lead? I would hope that we'd have some more flexibility on probably making a permanent studio would be a great goal. Bennett's over here, and he's doing a great job helping with all of this equipment, helping with some of the marketing things to get this off the ground. Allowing his position to expand would be really great. And basically you move to the point where it becomes polished, even more polished, so that it's just a one-stop shop for if you're in the LCMS or if you're a conservative Christian and you're interested in Christianity. This is a great shop, not to hear Brian Stecker talk, but to hear great guests come on. I'm just a means to bring these great guests into your, car ride or into your home.
So podcasts have been around now for a while. They're still like the new form of education entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd say for 30 to 50s, plus or minus a few on either end. Why do you think this? Because one thing you did when you did the research on, where's there a lane that we're not in,
mm-hmm.
or an empty lane in, again, the intersection of Christianity and culture, and you go with long form podcasts from an LCMS. Not that all the guests are going to be one of ours, but
mm-hmm.
but rooted in our understanding of truth. Why hasn't this lane already been taken?
Yeah, I think so. Joe Rogan kind of authored this lane, really, and I don't know, Bennett, what do you think? 2018, 2019? Yeah, really blew up in the video format. Actually, really blew up in COVID. Originally, people thought the audio was going to be the main one and video secondary, and that really shifted in COVID. Why? I'm not really sure. So it's not a terribly old style, right? So if you go back before 2018, you've got more of the audio style, more a 40-minute, people aren't going to want to listen for more than 40 minutes. So keep it there. So therefore you have to be more tight. You have to kind of follow more like traditional media. You have to stick to the script a little bit more. Or you've got the style where it's just one person talking, right? It's just me sharing what's in my mind, which once again, that's going to get boring pretty quickly. So the long form was started, 2018, give or take. I could be off a couple of years. So it's relatively new. Usually church media is not going to be the first mover in something like this. So they'll lag a little bit behind. But I've seen in a couple of different denominations, the Catholic one's the main one. They've done really well and it's really exploded and it's had some really tangible results within their community. So why not within our community? One, it takes a church like Trinity to say, we're going to get behind this and we're going to put some money behind it and we're going to lean into it and we're going to put some it takes work. And I think it has to happen from the ground up. I think it has to happen from the church level. I think it's tougher in our synod. I won't go into it, but it'd be tougher for our synod, for a district to get behind and put all their resources into something like this. It's easier for a church to do it. But
you've reached out to our district and it didn't take long before they were jumping in with some pretty sizable support. What did they see that led them to, they were were in.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they saw?
Yeah, they definitely liked the entrepreneurship aspect. They want churches to start to take those things on. Don't lean on, they don't go for it, churches, right? Don't lean on the synod would be, I think, kind of one of their things when it comes to initiatives. But definitely one of the things that they really saw, the gentleman I talked to, he's like, oh my, I think it was either kids or grandkids, they're kind of coming up to that age where they're going to start to question things. And this is a great way to help them through the questioning process, to be able to question, to have experts walk with them through things that they're going to question about Christianity and about that intersection in culture. And then immediately they're like, oh, there's so-and-so that's doing this thing. And I would love to get him on because I was so moved by what he said. And very few people know what he's saying or what he's doing. And therefore, this is a gateway to bring all of those great things and allow people to see those things, because we should hear those different stories of what people are doing in the church, what people are studying and speaking to. We don't want those things hidden underneath a rug.
And I'm not saying it was a surprise that the district jumped in with the level of support and the speed with which they promised that support. It was really affirming to see, because I saw it right away when you came in and pitched it, like, okay, I get this. This is awesome. Our church got it, but see the district do it. But also, you've reached out to how many people to be on the show? How many guests up to this point that you've got lined up?
We've got 16 where the dates are scheduled. Mm-hmm. And we've got another 4 or 5 who have said yes, but I haven't nailed down their date because we're just looking a little bit too far out to nail that down.
And I don't think we've talked, I think the last time you gave me the stat, it was when you were at 16, but up to the first 16, maybe the first 20, when you've talked to these guests, these experts in their areas that are operating up here, you haven't been turned down by anyone.
Nobody.
But everyone, when they heard what they would be on, the goal of the podcast, what the form, 100% said, I want to be on that.
Mm-hmm.
Simple question.
Yeah, we got
Why?
We got people flying out, taking time away from family. We've got a couple individuals who are helping set up a remote studio so that we could come to them, because there's 4 kind of concentrated in an area where something cool is going on. You'll see some of those podcasts coming up shortly. I think they certainly caught the vision. They liked the long form aspect. Maybe I can give you kind of one statistic there. There's one gentleman who is a very, very, he speaks. He's a very gifted speaker. He's a very gifted teacher. And I've heard him online speak about a couple different things. Just 10 out of 10. Mm-hmm. And you look at how many views, 211, 312, very rarely much more than that on some of these things. Why is that? I don't know. It's not because the content he's putting out is not top notch, because it is. It's because there's not a means by which that's being put out in front of everyone here at Trinity and every other church that everyone in the pew should be accessing and spending an hour with this gentleman. Well, they'll get to spend 2.5 hours, and it'll be in the form of a discussion. Again, it's one of the easier ways to follow, and we'll make it high quality. So hopefully people can get connected with him, because if not, that's a shame. We're disservicing our people if we're not letting them access the great thoughts that he has to share. And ideally, each episode is another example of that.
Outstanding. No, I mean, it's really impressive. And to me, that idea of everybody is saying yes to a podcast that, when they were asked, has 0 subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea, it's the format, it's the host. Give yourself some credit, right? And that everybody who's been introduced to this idea sees the lane, sees the vision, gets it, and wants to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think that intro is helpful, probably because this will be our first episode. So this is good for people to understand what our vision is. And we're not going to do this very often, but the one way you can help us out, we're not going to make a habit out of this. I know that's a normal thing, but if you can like and subscribe, or at least just subscribe, that's the big thing. If you want to help support us, I mean, I don't know how many views we'll get, but if everyone can just hit the subscribe button, you understand our vision. If you don't like our vision, don't hit the subscribe button. If you do, that's the one thing you could do to help really get this off the ground. That's the one thing you can do to help us out. We're not asking for money, so that's the vision of what this is. But I didn't bring you on just to
introduce the podcast.
Pat me on the back.
Yeah.
I do want to begin exploring some of these subjects, and a couple of different things I'd like to get in with you. We work together, so conversation comes naturally. We spend a lot of our time doing it right on the other side of this wall where your office is. But one area that I think everyone could benefit hearing from you is regarding marriage. And you did so you get an MDiv to become a pastor, master's in divinity, 4-year graduate program, and then you went on and did another MA at
Pittsburgh Theological Seminary of the Presbyterian Church, United States of America. Before that, though, and I should back up on why marriage. When guys graduate from seminary and become pastors, the natural tendency is to love funerals and loathe weddings. Because funerals, people are listening, they want hope, they want assurance that there's more to life than life. And at funerals, it's a natural chance to proclaim the gospel of Christ. Right? People are listening. It's great, and you can provide comfort for people in their hour of need. Weddings, on the other hand, is usually a middle-class couple pretending to be royalty who doesn't know what they're doing but wants it a certain way. And so most pastors dread weddings, right? Weddings are fantastic. So I've always loved weddings because they're goofy, right? It's just one day of your life that is not like any other day at all. There's no let's do a wedding again. Just have a day like a wedding. Like, let's rent out a church and dress up and tell everyone how much we love each other, and we'll dress up our friends that'll be there, and we'll sing songs, and then they'll give us gifts. There's no other day like a wedding. So they're goofy. Yeah. So already it's fun. And the couple's there in love. Like, this is going to be their big day. They've been looking forward to it. So to be a part of that, to be invited into someone's life at what's hopefully the high point, one of the high points is a tremendous blessing. I really got interested in weddings and marriage when I was in Nebraska, and I had there was a young lady that was going to our church. She was in college, and she calls me up out of nowhere and says, "Pastor, I'm engaged." I said, "Oh, it's congratulations. That's great. Can you do my wedding?" "Absolutely. Would love to do your wedding." "Okay. Can you do my wedding on New Year's Eve?" Like, "Oh, that'd be great. Or sorry, on New Year's Day." "Oh, that'd be great. Like New Year, new beginnings. Love it. Would love to spend January 1st doing your wedding." Long pause. "Can you do my wedding in New York City?" Like, tell me more, right? And the tell me more was she and her fiance had applied to be on the 3-season short-lived MTV series Engaged and Underage, and was one of the couples they chose. Underage meaning under 25, so it's not like weird high school stuff.
Yeah.
But like, and they were in college, and they took couples that had basically the odds stacked against them. And for this couple, it was family dynamics, and they had no money. And so I'd never done a wedding on MTV on January 1st from Times Square in New York. So interesting is better than boring. So you say yes to that. And so MTV flew me out to New York City, put me up in the Millennium Hotel, got to watch the ball drop from my hotel room on New Year's Eve. And then the next day, do their wedding live on MTV. So got to proclaim the gospel and marry this couple. And there was another couple too that didn't have a pastor, did their wedding too. So like 2 weddings.
You did 2 weddings that day, yeah.
2 weddings live on MTV, January 1st, 2009.
Where could, if someone wanted to go watch this, what's the show again?
You would have to look up Engaged and Underage. It was season 3.
Yeah.
Season 3, the show was kind of, if it was ever up here, by season 3 it was down here.
Yeah.
So it is difficult to find video clips of the Engaged and Underage bridal bowl.
Yeah.
But it was a thing.
What was MTV's? So you're a pastor. Not only that, you're a conservative LCMS pastor. What's their interaction with you? So
it was interesting. They came in. So there's a negative interaction and a positive interaction with them. They follow the couples around just to detail their joys, their struggles, from the proposal to I do, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it was coming at a time. It was coming in the middle of the financial crisis. So it was at a time when America, things were, your stocks lost 40%, you're unemployed, your house is worth a third of what it was before. Like, so at a difficult time in our country. And so I was asking the producer, which sounds like a weird thing. I was talking to this MTV producer about, and by the way, I don't know if the average listener knows, back in 2008, 2009, MTV, much bigger deal than it is today. Not as big as it was in the 80s, but it's a legitimate, people are watching, right? So, so they came in to do pre-marriage counseling, and they brought the camera crew with them. Well, you can't do pre-marriage counseling with a camera crew. So we talked about like superficial things that, not confidential stuff, just what's it like to be engaged? What's love like? Oh yeah, you guys are great, And the camera guy there tried to get me like, you want to talk about her relationship with her mom? And like, no, and don't tell me what to do. Yeah. Right. So had to explain to him that we're not going to do this. That was a negative interaction. But come to find out the positive interaction, there was a time when the camera crew's following him around and there's this big family blow up at a restaurant, like made for TV. Dishes are being slammed down. There's storming out. There's yelling. I mean, you would think this is like good, and they wouldn't show that on. They didn't air that part
for the sake of the integrity of the family. This
would make the family look bad, so we're not going to do it.
Wow, good on them.
So good for them. So I was really like, MTV, got to rethink what we think about them. Yeah. So in that, and the camera guy understood. He's like, I understand why you can't do that, but I thought I'd ask. And like, okay. But for them to spend, the Millennium Hotel at that time, on a non-important time of year, was $600 a night, cheapest room. So you can imagine what a room would go for at the most expensive time of the year, which for them would be New Year's Eve, because you're right there on Times Square. Plus the airfare, plus all the food voucher, meals, the whole thing. That for them to spend thousands of dollars for this couple to have their pastor come and do a 5-minute wedding service, good on them, right? I was really impressed with. We're just not going to find an LCMS pastor hanging out in New York City, and we'll fly your pastor out, put him up in a hotel. I mean, it was really cool. So that got me interested in marriage. And then
I got married. Do you still get fan mail?
Yeah. The hosts of the show were it was Spidey, Spencer Pratt and Heidi. What's her name?
Oh man, I don't know.
Spencer Pratt and Heidi Montag.
Okay.
This is back when they were a thing. So they were the hosts. I got to meet them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was interesting.
Yeah.
In hair and makeup, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a lot of fun, and that got me more interested in marriage. And then I got married, and then became even more interested in marriage. And then out in Pittsburgh, did an MA and needed a thesis. And so I thought, looking around as this was around the time, started the thesis in 2014, finished it in 2016. Right around the time Obergefell Hodges was in the news. So this was when the nation was deciding, what are we going to do about gay marriage? And the nation was very, culture wars, the whole thing. And listening to LCMS people respond to people arguing for a change in the understanding of marriage and going, we're not wrong, but we have a bunch of random ideas about marriage that we're throwing at the issue. We don't have a comprehensive theology of marriage. We have ideas about marriage. We have facts about marriage, but we don't have a theology of marriage. And historically at the church, if you look at this is par for the course. The church very, very rarely does proactive theology. It's usually reactive to something. So for example, in the early church, someone comes out and says, hey, I think there was a time when he was not, right? I think that Jesus isn't eternal. I don't think he's fully divine, right? So there's pushback to that. And well, now we got to wrestle with who is Jesus? What's the nature of the second person of the Trinity, right? Is second person of the Trinity. Who is Jesus? What does it mean? Two natures, one person, divine human natures in one person. And as a result of that hard work, which sprung from someone standing up and saying something that didn't sound right, now we got to address that. We did the theology. We did the hard work. We come up with the Nicene Creed. We come up with an understanding of two natures, one person, right?
So is it very much like these are assumed facts? Everyone's kind of agreed upon this. Someone comes in and says something wrong, and then we have to say, okay, that's definitely wrong, but we have to give a really thorough answer and really hash out why it's wrong. And then you get the Nicene Creed. Then you get a good theological understanding of a topic.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So for example, in the 1500s, the understanding of justification, right? They're saying something about how we're made right with God that doesn't sound right. I can put money into a thing and then it lessens purgatory for this like that doesn't, no, and so from that you get the Reformation and the understanding of justification, our understanding of justification, what makes you righteous before God. So in the same way, everyone's always done marriage, it's a man and a woman. There's usually some sort of paperwork involved. There's some holy man involved. And then you go live together and make babies, and she changes her last name, and that's marriage.
What about the year 1200? What about the year 900? What about the year 200? Right. So, I mean, this is something that for years and years, this is like everyone's. What you do. Yeah. No one's arguing this issue.
Right.
Until
we argued the issue.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is if you study how fast the culture shifted in, you have the Defense of Marriage Act. I think it was 1999. Which basically said marriage is between a man and a woman. Congress passed it overwhelmingly. 16 years later, Obergefell Hodges in 90? He's
looking at, so Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA.
96, sorry.
Signed by Bill Clinton in 96.
Yeah. So you have a liberal Democrat signing. And in a Democrat, I think in 96 at that time, that was before the Republican Revolution. Yeah, it passed, 85-14, Defense of Marriage Act? Is that what it's saying in the Senate? Overwhelming support for marriages between a man and a woman. And then less than 20 years later, you have the Supreme Court overturning, or Supreme Court saying that you have to allow two men and two women to recognize their relationships as marriage. And the culture is overwhelmingly fine with it.
Another interesting data point there. So Obama's first run was that 2008? Is that right? It was 2008 and then 2012. In 2008, he ran and said, and he backed up marriages between a man and a woman. He would not publicly say, and I don't know what he probably was completely.
Most liberal voting record in the Senate.
Yeah.
and he's saying marriage is a man and a woman.
Yeah. Probably not because he actually believed that. Probably
But
not.
politically,
He couldn't.
for the most liberal member of the Senate,
Yeah.
it is still politically advantageous to argue for marriage between a man and a woman.
So in 2008, culturally speaking, most people are not okay with this.
No. But it changes.
At least their internal data is telling them that's the case. You can't win the presidency if you say marriage is between a man and a woman and a woman.
Correct. And you go from there to now all of a sudden, if you look at the most recent stats, I think even a majority of Republicans are fine with gay marriage. Right. So why the shift so fast? And I'd argue two things. One, they made the issue not about marriage, but about love. Right. Secondly, we didn't have a good response.
Mm-hmm.
Our response is Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Well, again, like you're saying, that doesn't fly very well in a 2-hour long form discussion where let's get down, let's get beyond the bumper stickers and catchphrases. And let's drill down on, go deep on this.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have a coherent theology to address that issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we never had to. And so we got caught. We got caught with our pants down. Mm-hmm. And the rest of it, the history writes itself. So what is our theology? So what is our theology of marriage? So what I did was I took, so our denomination believes the Bible is the infallible, inspired, inerrant word of God. So we take those passages in the Bible that talk about marriage. Okay. What are those? What's the clear meaning of those passages? Then from there, you take a look at so in our Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we believe that the Book of Concord is a correct exposition of Scripture. In other words, every real church believes the Bible is the infallible, inspired, inerrant word of God, yet they're saying different things about different things. So what do we say the Bible says is Book of Concord? So where in the Book of Concord is marriage mentioned and what does it teach? From there, being specific to the LCMS, looking at other documents, resources that we don't say are authoritative, but that we use. Right. So, for example, our hymnal, The Rite of Marriage, out of our agenda book. Things like the Commission on Theology and Church Relations did 2 documents on homosexuality and marriage and divorce. Right. So those documents that we've generally said, like, yeah, this is a correct, it's not authoritative, but we like them. And from there, when you add all that up, what have we said about marriage? Now, you can argue we should have more sources, less, or whatever, but that's the goal of the thesis was let's at least get people talking in our synod smarter, right? Get the level of your guests, future guests, thinking about these things and come up with the real answer, right? This is to get the ball rolling on, let's admit that we don't have a theology of marriage and let's get working on it. Mm-hmm. So I learned a number of interesting things about marriage in researching marriage. And kind of the interesting thing was, the thing that jumped out at me was several things. One is asking the question, what's necessary for a marriage to exist? Like most people believe that, well, I go down and get my marriage license. We sign the marriage, we're married. You're going, okay, so the government is necessary for marriage to exist. Government's recognition of a relationship is necessary for that relationship to exist. Okay, play it out for me. What happens if the government comes to you, Brian Stecker, and says, we don't think you're married to Raylene anymore. Instead, we filled out this document that says you're married to who cares? Anybody else.
Yeah.
Here you go. You'd be like, that's dumb. You just rip it up and like, that's silly. That's obviously not what a marriage is.
So they don't pass the authority test. I wouldn't blink an eye at being like, oh, well, okay, they said so. Like,
sorry, Raylene, sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So is government necessary for a marriage to exist? Right. We argue no. Right. And the argument I've heard for yes is that in the beginning with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, either God or Adam was the government. And like, that's nice try. Like,
thank you, Moses, for your dissertation on the importance of politics.
Right.
Yeah.
First of all, not the intent. Second of all, the government would be defined as a third party distinct from the people involved in the marriage. Mm-hmm. So doesn't pass the sniff test, and God is not government.
Yep.
Right. So there is no government as we understand it in the beginning that would be related to governments today. So government is not necessary. So then what is the state doing with the whole marriage license thing? And what they're doing is they're saying, we as the state recognize this relationship as a marriage, right? Okay. If the government wants to do that, recognize some relationships as marriages, others is not, like that's okay. I mean, if they want to do that, that's fine. Give certain tax advantages, whatever, power of attorney to whatever status you get. That's fine, but it doesn't create the marriage. Okay. So then
So in other words there, so the government gives tax breaks to Raylene and I for being married. And point is, that's up to the government. The government can do that. They don't have to do that. Either way, that nothing about that decision has anything to do with our scriptural understanding of what God has ordained marriage to be. That's your point?
Correct.
Okay.
So let's go down that rabbit hole, right? So in the matter of gay marriage, which I'll argue in a few minutes, hopefully, isn't really the real issue in the changing scene of marriage today. There's something else that's a bigger change that actually impacts all of us. Has to do with, so I understand why the state would recognize a man and a woman as a marriage. It benefits the state to compel them to stay together, because over time the thinking is they're more likely to make more taxpayers, soldiers, members of society. They're likely to reproduce. So there's a reason why the government would want to incentivize men and women living together in committed relationships. In committed relationships, not only do you reproduce, but you are responsible for the children that you made. So the state doesn't have to invest in those kids. You, the mom and dad, are.
And study after study showcases that, right? I mean, if you've got a father and a mother in the same household, the chances of that kid
being a drain on society,
incarcerated,
right?
Yeah,
being on welfare, the whole thing.
Welfare.
The number one indicator of wealth across the board is marriage. Marriage creates wealth for reasons. Google it, right?
Yep.
But it does. So marriage then is a good umbrella under which children to be raised. It doesn't cost the government anything, and out of it they get productive tax-paying citizens. So
in other words, if you removed all politics from the situation, and you basically said, does this make economic and
is it in the government's best interest?
Yeah.
To promote this kind of relationship?
It seems pretty cut and dry. Yes.
Overall, yes.
Yeah.
So then you'd say, okay, well, so why would the government subsidize non-childbearing age man and woman to live together? Well, eventually one of them is going to get sick. And if you don't have someone to take care of you, you become a drain on society. But if you have someone to take care of you, then you cost the government less. So there's a benefit at the end of life too, after childbearing age, for man and woman to live together. So is there a benefit to the government to subsidize or promote man-man or woman-woman relationships? Well, you can't reproduce. You can argue, well, they can adopt. Yeah, well, any two people can adopt, right? So that's not a reason to incentivize it. Why incentivize homosexual relationships? And one of the arguments is because when one gets sick, the other one's there for them, right? That's valid, right? But is that a strong enough argument to say, we want to subsidize your relationship or privilege your relationship for 50 years so in the last two, when one of you gets sick, you're less of a burden on society? Now, maybe you could make the case, but with no-fault divorce and divorce being, you can't guarantee the continuity of that relationship. So I'd argue that's not a compelling reason to recognize those relationships. So can two men reproduce? No. Can two women reproduce? No. So the other reason why you would promote marriage isn't there either. So what's interesting is that the debate about marriage, no one ever argued it from the government's perspective. Why would the government choose to, what's in it for them? What happened was the government followed culture in, this can get our politicians reelected if we recognize these relationships as marriage. It was never done in the best interest of the state.
It was done out of political and cultural pressure.
Yes. So that was interesting. And then you move on from there and you say, okay, so the government's not necessary for marriage to exist. And if the government wants to recognize or privilege certain relationships, it can. We're sorry that they use the word marriage to describe these relationships that they're privileging. The second one is, what's necessary for marriage to exist? So for Christians, you swing back. So if the state's not necessary, maybe the church is. You need to have some God person, ding, you're married, right? Okay. Well, that one's easy to disprove because, again, who's marrying Adam and Eve? Well, God is. Like, okay, well, great, but God's everywhere. Why do you need a human representative of God present to recognize a marriage? You don't. You don't. So you don't need so non-Christians can marry, right? So what is necessary for a marriage to exist? What makes the marriage, and when does the marriage happen? This is where it gets messy, right? So traditional Christian wedding, everybody comes together. It's this goofy thing where middle-class people pretend to be royalty for a day. We dress our friends up. We come up front, and the hired holy man says, "I now pronounce you to be husband and wife." And that's pretty much where we're like, it happened, right? And then you exchange rings. It happened. You do unity sand, unity candle, unity braid, unity whatever. It happened, right? Then you go off. There's a reception. The couple leaves early, and then it really happens, right? So there's markers along the way that, we probably couldn't pin it down to any one time when, boom, but there's markers for when you're married, ultimately climaxing in
the climax.
In the climax. Correct. Right. So, but none of that's like, so what is necessary for a marriage to exist? Do you need vows? Do you need rings? Do you need a unity thing? Do you need post-reception, do you need intercourse? And that's one question for which the answer is nebulous. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
So there's just markers for being married where we live together. Taking someone's last name is we're identifying as one flesh. That way we're coming together physically. We're sharing all of our property. We have children together. We are committed to each other, right?
So historically, wasn't there, you'll know more about this, but wasn't there at least a time period where the understanding was the marriage was valid as long as physically the two became one, right? The actual marriage act.
I know first century Jewish rites, or
well, I think it was. I think for Luther, Melanchthon was the person who had to double check, right, or had to vouch for the fact that had taken place. And
is she still intact? You're asking, right? If she's still intact and they haven't come together, then
yeah, if they haven't actually come together physically, then the marriage is not valid until that takes place, right? I think that's at least there were time periods where that was the case. You're saying that's not necessarily.
That's one of the markers.
That's one of the markers. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there is a mystery as to, is it a black and white single, married?
Mm-hmm.
And again, on a wedding day, we're talking about a few hours time,
right?
That by the end of the night, everyone's recognizing you to be married.
And a Jewish wedding took a week.
Yeah. And the last day of the wedding feast was they go into the tent and come out with a big old smile on their face.
So that's the capstone, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So for them, it was a week-long process, right? So partying and carrying on. For us, it's the vows.
Yeah.
I would argue the vows. If you had to pick one marker above all else, what if the couple's, impotent or whatever, they can't come together, whatever, mutilate.
Public promise.
Public declaration of this is my wife and that's my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think if you had to narrow it down to one thing.
Is there something to the husband and the wife, bride and the groom, that they're submitting to the church in a way? Because if they go through it, if they're going through like the Christian rite, the way that we do it out of our agenda, right? So they make their public vows, so they do their part. And then their expectation is that the church itself, on behalf of Christ, is going to bless the marriage and give them affirmation that God is now seeing them as a married couple. And everyone is agreeing that's in the room. The parents are agreeing, the husband and wife are agreeing, the pastor as a representation of the church, as a representation of Christ, is agreeing. So we're all basically, we've got a lot of data points here that are saying we all agree that God's calling this a marriage. And if anyone tries to say this isn't a marriage in a month, we've got a lot of data points to say, nope, God calls this a marriage. And we all agreed upon that.
It's like you're looking at an animal, right? It's got a beak, it has wings, it floats, it quacks. We've seen enough. This is a duck, right? So, but again, in the thesis, I'm not trying to create the Lutheran theology of marriage. I'm trying to articulate what our theology is based on the authoritative traditional sources we use. Mm-hmm. So if you look at our rite of marriage, and I think you're exactly right. You come in and in the rite, and this is true for most churches, the pastor explains this is what marriage is. So we're laying the biblical foundation for, we're not making this up. This is divinely instituted for the purposes, And then we ask, and this is interesting because I think this fits into the theology. Will you have this woman to be your wife? Yes. Will you have this man to be your husband? Yes. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? Her mother and I do. Mm-hmm. Right. So now you're getting both. The families are giving an opportunity to give their thumbs up, but you ask the couple, do you want to do this? And I think that will hold that off to the side. That's key to the understanding. And then there's the vows, which run through the biblical understanding of what husbands and wives do, the purpose, their purpose within marriage, right? Better, worse, rich, poor, sickness and health, love and to cherish. So, and then at the end they say, they repeat those vows, right? And then after those vows are said in the liturgy, clergy says, basically, they've given themselves to each other by solemn pledges and have declared the same before God and these witnesses. I pronounce them to be, not I create the marriage. Mm-hmm. Boom, you're married. It's I've seen enough here. This is a marriage, is what we're saying. So, right. So it gets down to we've seen enough during this service. You guys are married.
Yeah.
And then you can do other things, exchange of rings, another way of saying, yes, we want to do the unity stuff. But that's
I heard I was at a wedding the other day. This is my cousin's wedding, different denomination, but he went on and he when he was describing the rings in the ceremony, he used something with pride and prejudice. Have you heard this? Mm-mm. So he was describing the ring and he said, this ring is a sign of pride and prejudice. So when you're in public, you're showing that you're proud of your spouse. You're proud to be married to the person that you're married, and you're not ashamed. You're public about this. And prejudice is you are prejudiced against everybody else who would dare stand in the way. So this ring is a finger to anyone that would try to stand in between that and to say, absolutely not. I'm prejudiced against you on behalf of she whom I'm proud of. And I thought that was such a cool description of that constant reminder of fidelity.
Yeah, I mean, it's the rings are powerful. I mean, the eternity, there's no beginning, there's no end.
Not necessary, but
right. But it's not necessary, but it's a great reminder, and also to show, like when I was a single guy, right? It's nice to know you look, hey, and you see the ring, like, well, I'm going to back off. Like I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm not going to go there. So
you've helped me out. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So it is helpful that way. It's repellent, right? And also, if you're not feeling, your most loyal, right? This can still do the job for you.
Yeah.
Right. So it does. It's very helpful. It's a good reminder. Also, not necessary. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting in our theology. The couples voluntarily say, "I want to do this." No one's making us do this, and I think that's one of the understandings of marriage is that it is entered into voluntarily by the man and the woman. No one can force you into marriage, right? And then faithfulness is what sustains the marriage, right? I mean, you see marriages, and you see the counseling, right? Your spouse can be a drunk, they can be bad with money, they can be lazy, they can let themselves go, they can be a whole bunch of things. And your marriage, it may make your marriage more difficult, but your marriage is still intact. The one thing that, personal experience of couples coming in, with fractured marriages, and from the scriptures, I pledge to you my faithfulness is the last vow you make in the marriage rite. It's not, I pledge to you, I'm going to be hot. I pledge to you, I'm going to make money. I pledge to you, I'm going to be nice to you. I pledge to you, I'm going to love you. No, I pledge to you my faithfulness, because that's the one thing our theology says, I think. If you break faithfulness, you can be forgiven before God. That's 100%. Blood of Christ covers infidelity. But you've destroyed the marriage. You've destroyed your marriage. Mm-hmm. You can try to piece it back together, and God be with you if you try that. And the church should rally around people that want to. But you did the one thing you can't do. Mm-hmm. So unfaithfulness shakes marriage far more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's that two becoming one, and there's a mystery there on the two becoming one flesh. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing I learned. So voluntarily, enter into voluntarily, sustained by faithfulness, and it's as long as both spouses live. Mm-hmm. Right. So, this idea of, we're eternally, no, you're not. Even Jesus in heaven, there's going to be no marriage. They'll be like the angels, right? Your marriage is good for this life only, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, so people after their spouse dies they still wear their wedding ring. That's fine. That's fine. They were the love of your life. You look at your ring and you remember all the good times, all the together. That's great. That's great. You're rejoicing in God's blessing to you for a time. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong saying, after, if your spouse dies, I don't want to do this again. They were my one. 100% great. But you are not bound by your marriage vows if your spouse passes away. You were a good spouse. You helped them run their race. You helped them move them closer to Christ. And now they see his face. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's that. And then what is the purpose of marriage? As Christians, we know the purpose of marriage is specifically for us, for the husband to be like Jesus and for the wife to be like the church. Good luck. Keep trying, mm-hmm. right? Very, very difficult task, but also a fulfilling task, because I will never be the perfect Christ to my wife. I always have room for improvement, and I should be looking for ways to improve over time. One thing I told Alyssa, I didn't say a lot of good things the first few years we were married. Right? New husband, like you're still learning, but it was being able to tell her shortly after we got married, the good news is I'm the worst husband I am ever going to be right now, mm-hmm. Lord willing, because over time I hope to get better, and it's going to take you need to help me. It's going to take my whole life. But the goal is to keep improving, because my goal is to be like Christ to her. And you're never going to get there, but you can move in the right direction.
That was one of the great teachings we received. I think it was before we were married. Good to return to it too, is just when you see that on the kind of the inverse side, when you see that in your spouse, right? So you start to see, as marriage goes on, you start to see all these different weaknesses that you didn't recognize before marriage. And the key is not to balk at that and say, man, maybe I made the wrong decision, but rather your sworn responsibility before God, and the reason God put you into this position, is to actually help your spouse move towards perfection. So mm-hmm. when you see those are actually, that's why God put you into this marriage, is to say, I see your weaknesses, and my job is to now help you with those weaknesses. Not just put up with and just kind of brush underneath the rug, but rather I'm going to help you work with those. And then being humble enough to say, and I know that it's going to work the same in the opposite way, right? You guys are working each other towards the man and woman that Christ has created you to be.
That's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some days better than others, right? So but the reason why, but God didn't create marriage in the beginning, you could argue, for a husband to be like Jesus and wife to be like the church, because it was before the fall. Although the roles, anyway, complicated, but rather for them to enjoy their humanity. If you look at when God creates Adam and Eve, right, the first thing he does when he brings them together is he blesses them, right? And then he says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So our mission statement, right, as human beings, and I would argue the mission statement survives the fall, be fruitful and multiply, have babies, mm-hmm. fill the earth and subdue it. Get out there and live in my creation, subdue it, bring it to heel. Not recklessly, sinfully, but get out there and enjoy life. Enjoy this world that I have made for you to have dominion over. Mm-hmm. And the tool that we've been given, the only tool we've been given to do that is marriage. Mm-hmm. Right? It's after Adam and Eve come together that God gives them that mission statement. So marriage is the tool through which we are supposed to, if you will, enjoy our humanity. Mm-hmm. Now, post-fall, does that mean everybody should marry? Absolutely not. Right? Paul gives a number of reasons why it's better for, especially for the followers of Christ, to not marry. But that is as a result of the world being fallen, not
the original design.
Correct.
So what do we do with create man in my image and according to my likeness? Mm-hmm. Man's alone. That's not good. That's the first thing that's not good, right? Mm-hmm. Is there something so we've already got in Genesis 1, and then again in Genesis 2, we have this picture of one God, right? It says God created singular. And then it moves on to let us, plural, right? Mm-hmm. So as a Christian, we can look back on this and we can say, well, there's the roots for the Trinity in our proper understanding. So is there something to the very essence of God is one of relationship? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit have a relationship before there's even light. So relationship precedes creation. Relationship is at the very essence of what being is, because it's there within God before creation. So then God creates Adam, who's alone. He's not yet in the image of God. Is that fair? Until he has relationship with his wife, is he actually reflecting God? Because God has relationship within himself, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And now you've got Eve being drawn out of Adam. And now you've got the two become one flesh. So there's, in some sense, there's one unit, but there's relationship within. So now you start to see that Trinitarian relationship reflected in creation. And then, as you say, then they go and now they get their marching orders. Now that they are looking like the image of God, they're created in that same likeness with a relationship. Now they're going to reproduce, they're going to overflow in their being, and they're going to go out and they're going to subdue and enjoy creation and all these kind of things. So is that kind of essential to that pre-fall understanding of what makes us
who we are?
Who we are, yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think you can see it in, again, and we can get into, the pre-fall world is not it's a very weird place, right? You have, before sin, we believe sin comes in chapter 3, yet already in chapter 1 and 2, it is not good. There is something that is not good in the pristine creation. There is a creation that needs to be subdued.
I love that word, yeah.
And there is a shrewd serpent, right? Plain reading of the text, right? So the pre-fall world is not this like puffy cloud, harps and sitting around kind of thing. But yes, there is something to if we are to be in the nature of God, right? And his likeness, again, the image of God who by nature is invisible. So there's a mystery to what does it mean to be made in the image of something that has no image? And I would argue that the text leads you more to understand it's the having dominion piece that is where we are the image of the invisible God, in the dominion we've been given over, right? But in our essence, if we are to be the image of the invisible God in terms of our essence, yes, we can't be alone because God is not alone. And we read that as the Trinity. So yes, man's identity as the image of God is not good until Eve joins Adam. Absolutely. And I like the way you pointed out, she is created from him. They're of the same stuff. And the other thing to point
Proceeds
out
from?
Is homoousios. I lost my train of thought. The
homoousios has gotten you
homoousios
again.
trips me up every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're kind of walking through and we're seeing just marriage is not of the state.
Not necessary for marriage to exist.
Not necessary, yeah. We're not against the state affirming, and that's a good thing. And in fact, it's really good, especially if the state gets on board with the Christian understanding of marriage and says, we want to get on board with that. That's good for the culture. Not necessary. What is necessary? Slightly ambiguous. We do know that God is going to be necessary. God's the one that brings marriage, but do you need rings? Do you need the physical? All these different things are pointers to what is essential. And all of these things you're kind of using as kind of gateways into getting to the core of what is marriage, right? And then that's going to help you define over and against what are false understandings of marriage. Is that kind of where you're drawing this towards? Right.
Marriage is a relationship between one unmarried man and one unmarried woman, created by God, sustained by faithfulness for them to enjoy their humanity as long as they both shall live. Is the understanding of marriage that you would draw from the scriptures. And again, if you want to do a 5-sentence definition of marriage, you could say more, but one sentence, that's, So it's these markers that exist. And again, our church has come down on after we hear the vows, which correctly articulate what each is to do within marriage. And again, at the end, it's faithfulness. Once we hear that, we say, I've seen enough. This is a husband and wife. So I'd say at least that. A hidden marriage is a bad idea, right? These vows are to be set out in the open publicly. Ideally, as part of a marriage is a worship service, which again is an open service, not a closed. Right now, we do most weddings are invitation only, so that's okay. But in our original context, again Lutheran, there were worship services. In the original context, it was like a rubric in the middle of a worship service. You do the offering, and now before we do the prayers, Joe and Sally are going to come up and we're going to get them married. And if you care about Joe and Sally following the service in the church basement, they're going to have cookies and you can tell them how great they look. And you'd marry them. They'd say their vows. You pronounce them husband and wife and you continue with the service.
Go take communion.
Right. So, is it bad that we've made a really super big deal about it? Not necessarily.
Because the Jews did it, right? I mean, the Jews took a week, so.
And it's the one institution that we have as human beings that is not a response to the fall. It existed pre-fall. Other institutions are post-fall, right? They're conditioned by, we live in a sinful, messed up world. Marriage is that one institution that predates the fall. And there's something pristine about it. There's something beautiful about it. There's something, I get to look back in time into Eden with this. They did this in Eden. That is unlike anything else. Now, of course, human beings find a way to mess it up, sure. But there's something, that's why I don't understand pastors that don't like weddings.
Yeah.
If you don't like weddings, that's your fault. God made marriage in the beginning before the fall into sin. He likes marriage. He likes weddings. Yeah, they're kind of goofy, but you can too, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. And it doesn't matter that they're not listening to you, right? Again, the whole no one listens to you in your marriage sermon. Like, well, then make it a good sermon.
Yeah.
Or
keep it short.
What I love about weddings is, so you're up there, right? You come out front and then that kicks things off and then the groom stands next to you. And as a pastor, like, we're used to standing awkwardly for long periods of time in front of groups of people. So for us, this is like a Sunday morning. Only we're just watching people walk in slowly at church speed, dressed up the same. But what's fun is to watch the groom, because he's never done this. And all grooms they're all the same. They're all like happy, nervous. This is taking too long. What's going on? Oh my gosh,
Sweating.
I can't wait. Sweating. But the best part about a wedding is, so everyone comes up front. And now you've got the bridesmaids and groomsmen. And then the bride comes in and the music changes and everybody stands up and everybody looks back at the bride. And she's beaming and her dad is trying not to cry and look proud at the same time. And it's great. It's wonderful. There's nothing else like it. But the next time you're at a wedding, take a look at the groom as the bride comes down the aisle. Because he is like, eyes are wide. He's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And what's neat about that is when you read, when Paul in Ephesians connects marriage to a husband and wife to Christ in the church, Christ is the husband, church is the bride. And the way that the husband looks at the bride coming down the aisle to him is the same way Christ looks at us. And the only reason why that's because we're not pretty. We don't have a white gown, like we're sinful, and that he has removed our sins so far away from us and made us so righteous in his sight that he can look at us the same way a groom looks at a bride on a wedding day. That's how complete and total and sufficient his work is for us. But yeah, so you look at the groom looking at the bride coming down, and he's it's this wonderful nervous thing.
Yeah, and that's where the bride is supposed to be done up on her wedding. She's supposed to go over the top on that. It's not a time to be like, well, I'm just going to work kind of humble, because the point is, if this is representation of Christ and his church, when you're presented to Christ, you're presented in your perfection, which
Without
is why
soil or wrinkle or any such thing.
Yeah. So what do? You're play acting on that day, right? You're play acting as if the wife was perfect and perfectly pure. And the dress and everything about that is supposed to, it's great imagery for that. So I do yes, lean into that. She's supposed to look the most beautiful she ever does on that day, because it should be a little foretaste and a little pre-service of what the marriage between Christ and his church looks like. When we're presented to him, well, like you said, we're not presented in our ugliness and with all of our imperfections showing. We're not wearing bathing suits. We are dressed up as if we were Christ, right? With all of Christ's righteousness, decorated on us. So it's great imagery.
Yeah, go to weddings, crash them.
Go to weddings, yeah.
Yeah, watch. Yeah.
So you mentioned at the beginning, I don't know if you want to go here or not, but I am interested. You said, the switch in America to saying, okay, we can do man on man and woman on woman marriage certainly affects the marriage conversation within the church. But you said there's something else that even is a bigger shift in marriage, if that's the right way to put it.
Right. So one of the fears that I think most Christians had when we're going through the gay marriage debate is one, that's not marriage, right? You got it wrong. What's interesting is what about, anyway, well, we'll skip that. How is this going to affect me and my kids? If we let two men marry or two women marry, what's it going to do when my son wants to marry, my daughter wants to marry, I want to marry? Will it fundamentally change what people think of when they think of marriage. And okay, that's a valid question. And there's lots of concerns with what are we teaching as a culture outside of forget the us in the church and our worldview normed and shaped by Scripture. What's being taught out in the public square about marriage when you let really anyone do it now, right? So, but I would argue that
real quick. So I mean, in other words, you're saying there's a challenge because the culture around your children, and you've got two children, not quite at marriage age yet, but 15 years or so, you'll enter into that. The culture's looking at it one way. You and the church are teaching it another way. So is that a challenge? Yes. Is that an unusual challenge? And the point's no, right? Because culture is always going to be operating differently from the church. So therefore, it's just another data point where you have to remind your kids you're part of a different kingdom.
It's actually created an opportunity for us Christians to say we are distinct, and what we believe is actually more loving, better, and makes more sense. Right? It's given us a way to be distinct. So our kids, I don't think, are going to have a problem growing up having a traditional understanding of marriage. I'm not worried about that. But there is a change, another change that has taken place.
Real quick, though, I just want to dive.
Yeah.
So to kind of tie these two together, is the state necessary? No, but it's good for them to endorse our type of marriage. It's good for the culture. It's good for the community. We care about the culture and community. We want that to be healthy. If they go another way, nothing new. That's pretty normal. What about, it seems like the chief concern then is, what if a church says, us too? We too will do what the culture is doing. We as a church will also marry man and woman and woman. That seems like that's where the real issue comes in. And our church does not do that, but many churches have done that.
No, and I would see this, and I think we're going to get into later on, what are signs that your church is unhealthy? Right? So churches make mistakes, right? Churches made mistakes when it came to the issue of slavery. They make mistakes when it comes to the issue of, whatever the case may be. But there are markers that churches can show that say there's a deeper problem here. So when I would see a church that adopts a cultural understanding of marriage that is different from what that church used to believe in, so something changes in the church, say, why the change? Is a church that has a flawed understanding of marriage, like, are they going to burn in hell forever? Not for that. Churches make mistakes, but I would say, what allowed you to make that mistake? What allowed you to say, we're going to follow culture in our understanding of marriage, right? Now, it could be that, we're talking about marriage and your pastor picks up the Bible and he's reading about marriage and he goes, I see that we've got the Bible wrong for the last 2,000 years. And it turns out that there's clear evidence here that we've got it wrong and that 2 men or 2 women should be able to marry. Okay. Could that have happened in some cases? I don't know how you would get there, but maybe.
Someone somewhere might have made that very weird reading or whatnot. But it doesn't seem like the evidence would support that. Pastors can be goofy. Yeah.
True. What's more likely to have happened is we read the Scriptures, we know what the church has historically taught, therefore we know what's in Scripture, and we're choosing to say, on this issue, Scripture speaks, but we're going to tell it it's being silent, or Scripture is just flat out wrong. And we're going to say, if Paul or Jesus knew what we knew today, they wouldn't have said what they wrote back then. And the Bible's culturally conditioned and they're a bunch of closed-minded bigots or whatever the case may be. We are going to say either we know more than what Scripture says or we're choosing to follow culture on this. The problem there is not, the bigger problem isn't you got marriage wrong, right? So then this church does one gay wedding every 5 years. I mean, dumb, but right? The big problem is that you are undermining the authority of Scripture and how you view the Word of God is the problem. Because ultimately what that leads to is an erosion on those articles of faith that are more closely connected to who Jesus is, what he's done, who you are, what you've been called to do, the core of our faith. So the sign would be, we're going to allow for gay marriage because we're going to say we're just going to move away from the historic teaching of Scripture on this. Where else are we going to do this? And what happens when it comes to, usually what comes would be something like, Scripture is clear that apart from Christ, there's no salvation. well,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't sound nice. What if people are, then you move away from that, our particularness when it comes to how people are saved is always going to be through Christ. You could, in other areas as well. But the sign is you got marriage wrong. Why?
Yeah.
Not that you shouldn't get marriage wrong because it's not easy. It's not hard to get right. But what's that a sign of? And I would argue it has to do with the biblical inerrancy, doctrine of biblical inerrancy.
So you made 3 or 4 mistakes to get to that point, which is most likely, which is the real issue, is that it's not probably just this. It's probably we've made a lot of mistakes to get here. And then for someone in that, like if you're, your children, they're here, so you can say culture's doing this, yeah, but let me give you this Christian ethos and understanding and be able to compare it against culture. And you can use that as actually a very good teaching method on helping your children understand the distinctiveness of Christianity. If they were in a church that did not do that, then where's the difference between Christianity and culture? And it creates a very slippery slope for someone being brought up in that kind of situation where, once again, if they're going to get that one wrong, what other things are they going to get wrong?
Right.
And at what point is it culture clothed in Christianity? Right.
No, yeah. So a church that has adopted homosexual, a different understanding of marriage the problem here is probably you have a low view of Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't believe Scripture is inspired, infallible, and inerrant, right? How do we know about Christ?
Mm-hmm.
Through Scripture, right? That's what teaches us about Christ. Well, if I can't trust Scripture, immediately it goes to who, attacks
everything's up for
understanding
grabs
who is Jesus.
at that point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I derailed you. You were going to get to your point, and actually I got to run to the restroom. So let's do that, and then we will jump into, we've been setting this up for a long time. What is this other thing that has had a bigger impact than this change in marriage? All right, we'll be right back.
We'll be back after this. Yeah.
And we're back. So the thing which has led to a bigger shift in our understanding of marriage than even the recent changes in marriage culturally.
Right. So one thing my thesis advisor, Dr. Charles Partee, had me do was research the sociology of marriage. He didn't want me to jump right in with the theology, but do the sociology. So dabbled in gathering statistics and information about the changing scene of marriage before gay marriage, right? And what I saw was, what really struck me was how small our families are today compared to how big they used to be. So, for example, back in 1790, which for us is ancient history, but historically it's not too long ago, the average person, about 50% of the population, lived in a household of more than 6 people. Today, more than half of the households are 1 or 2 people. So when you say family, what do you think of? Back then, 1790, it's a room full of offspring and your wife, right? Today, when you say family, it's a child and a dog, right? Families are different. And those that get married and have kids, if you go beyond 2, I mean, think about your experience, right? The world is made for families of 4. If you go more than 2 kids, you need to buy a special vehicle. You go to a restaurant with 3 extra people, right? They don't know what to do. You got to get the special seating section. You got to get, they have to rearrange tables and chairs. The world, and just think about how much in our world today is meant for families of 4. And yet, if you go back, again, it's a little bit of time, 230 years or so, the average family would come in with 7, 8, 9, 10 people. And it'd be weird if you came in with 3 kids. It'd be weird if you came in with 4 kids. Normal would start around 5 kids. Now we're talking. So why does that affect marriage? Because you didn't have kids until you got married. So going into marriage, and now let the games begin. Now we're going to have lots of babies, right? Especially when you consider how high infant mortality was back in the day, right? You're going to lose 1 or 2 or 3. Difficulty in childbearing, right? We didn't have modern medicine like we do today. And yet those average families were still so big. Having lots of kids was arguably the prime driver for getting married based on the evidence.
So you're building I think you said it before, you're building a small army, right? Like you're getting married and you're building a household, right? Multiple kids who are going to do multiple things, and you guys are going to work together as a unit in order to accomplish different things. Or to tie it back to your Genesis 1, Genesis 2 tie-in, you're going to go out and you're going to subdue a big piece of land probably, right?
We alone are going to fill the earth and subdue it, because that's what marriage is for. That's the purpose for marriage. So today, marriage is more focused on your love, right? And again, not knocking love. Love is great, and it'd be weird if you married someone you didn't love, right? But that's the focus today.
Emotional focus, maybe.
Emotional focus, right? Love, more, the focus is on the person you're married to, and that, whereas if you went back hundreds of years, you and your spouse were producing this army, right? You were focused outside of yourselves. So I would argue that the change in family size and what you think you're getting into when you get married is different today than it was a couple generations ago. So, for example, today when a couple gets married, down the road we might have some kids. We may not, but the focus is going to be on our relationship with each other. We want better and more of the same, right? We want to move in together. We want to have more, come together more often. We want to share property. It's more and better of the same. Whereas in the past, you got married and then you started reproducing, and the focus was on that. So I think that. So, for example, when you're reading all these Lutheran, theology things, when they're talking about marriage, they have in mind that thing that you do, and then you start making your small army. Whereas today, that it's that thing you do when you fall in love, and I think that helps to.
So that's changing. That changes. That impacts probably a lot of things. One would be the purpose or your expectation for marriage, right? So in this picture you're painting, the understanding is myself. This one thing is, who am I looking for? I'm looking for someone who can do that with me, handle 6, 7 kids and raise a household.
7 boys and 4 girls while I'm off working.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good mom.
Right? If I'm looking for if I'm thinking one child and a dog, as you said, then what am I looking for in the spouse? I don't know, maybe someone that looks good at a party with me, or someone that's going to make $90K and go on vacation well with me so we can travel well together. Those things are fine. We certainly like to do some of those things, but that would be the difference being that's what you're looking for in a spouse today versus back then. And that's going to very much change the expectations of what the marriage is going to look like.
And not saying one is right and one is wrong, but just saying they're very different. And I think that's a more fruitful discussion for Christians to have than what does it mean that 3% of our population can marry that used to not marry. Right? If you really wanted to get into it as Christians, instead of talking about gay marriage, talk about remarriage. Right? You get into what the Scripture says about remarriage, and if Christians are divorced and your ex is still alive, as much as you can, try to reconcile with them. Have we looked at that? As Christians, have we looked at Paul's admonitions, it's better for a man not to marry? What do we do about remarriages? How do we handle them when divorced Christians whose exes are still living want to remarry? How do we handle that? I'm not saying they shouldn't, but we haven't thought through what are the arguments for, what are the arguments against when Scripture does talk about go and be reconciled. When it does talk about it's better to be, we as a church, have we created a culture where it's weird if you don't get married? Instead of taking Paul's words, it's better for you not to marry. And Paul's argument, by the way, isn't that marriage is bad. He has nothing against marriage. He likes marriage. He was probably married at one point. I would argue Paul's a widower. Right? It's hard to advance in Judaism as quickly as he did, as far as he did, and not be married. So odds are Paul was married, his wife died, and he's a widower. Odds are, maybe not. Maybe he never married. Maybe, but those are the odds. But what he's saying is, and having been in ministry, single and married, I can tell you he's 100% right. He's saying the reason why it's better for you not to marry is because the days are evil. It's hard to be a good spouse. And when you're married, and this is the interesting argument he makes in 1 Corinthians, he says that when you're married, your loyalties are divided between your spouse and the Lord, right? You serve Lord over here, so your spouse. We would argue that, well, being a good husband is a form of, good vocation stuff. But mean, I could see that when I was a single pastor, not married, I could work all the time. I could always visit someone, always be there, because I was in Nebraska and I was single, nothing else to do. Married now, you got to say, I'm going home, right? Now I need to go and be with my wife, right? So you're not going to be as productive for the Lord in that way, married versus single. And notice Paul doesn't say, and that's a problem. He says that's a given. When you're married, your loyalties are divided or your priorities are divided. When you're single, you can run. So be single and do more for the Lord. That's his argument.
What do you think of the Catholic? Right. I mean, they're priesthood, right? So their priesthood's not supposed to be married. They don't say that's a biblical mandate. They say that's the way that we're going to run our priesthood because we think that's the best practical move. So they're not saying anyone that doesn't do it this way is heretical. They're saying we decided to do it this way.
Let me sit in judgment of the historical practice of a group of 1.2 billion people. Right.
Go.
Right. Yeah. I think the issue for them, because they have more trouble recruiting clergy than we do. I think the issue isn't that they require celibacy of their clergy. That's the argument is saying, the amount of work we're going to give you, you're not going to be able to be a good priest and a good husband. So we're going to take one off the table. And again, they break the rule from time to time. If you're married before you become Catholic, you can stay married and become a priest.
So it's still in your cards.
It's long-term thinking. Yeah. Get a call to Italy, sit out there. Anyway, that's fine. They've decided for what they require of their clergy, this makes the most sense. That's fine. I think they would do a better job recruiting, not if they get rid of the celibacy requirement. I think that's fair. Again, they made the decision that based on the job description, that makes sense. I think where they could see some improvement and not sacrifice what they believe is to say, right now, when you roll into Catholic seminary at 18, the idea is once you become a priest, you're a priest forever. Right? And so some 18-year-old is going, am I ready to commit to lifelong celibacy? I'm not ready to commit to 2-year celibacy. So I think the implication of permanence is a barrier to guys who would say, you know what? I can go out and be a parish priest until I'm 30, 35. Love to serve the Lord in that way. And I'm willing to forego marriage during that time. Sure, that's fine. I want to 100 miles an hour, be a priest. And then at some point, I'd like to get married and go do something else. And I think if they said, let's allow for that, let's encourage that, let's remove the implication of permanence as a priest, you'd get guys who are saying, I can give 10 years to this. I can give 15 years to this. And of those guys that would say yes to that, where before they would say no, half of them will probably stay. Right. So, the arguments are, you need to get rid of clerical celibacy and let married men become priests to do the priest shortage. You're missing I would, and again, what do I know? But from the outside looking in, it would seem that getting rid of the implication of permanence, and you're going to do this forever, would be the barrier to take down that doesn't sacrifice what you believe is right.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that because so let's say I'm a Catholic. Obviously, I'm in the pastor here in the Lutheran Church, and that was never a struggle to say, okay, I've got to give up being married. I don't think I could be a priest in the Catholic Church because I don't think that at any point in the last decade or up to this point, I've never been able to say, yeah, I know that I don't want to get married for the rest of my life, or I'm okay making that sacrifice forever. However, that said, I think I would have been on board similar with the military. Yep, I'll give 10 years or I'll give 15 years. And I think you've pointed out before, if you're a single guy, what can you do in that time? You can get a doctorate's degree. You can read every book you've ever wanted to read. You can grow internally in a profound way. And then you're 35. Plenty of time to go get married and then start a household and whatnot. And now you've gone through the same kind of training that a soldier would go through. And now they come back stateside, and now they are a well-formed individual ready to take on a different profession. Same thing with so, yeah.
Yeah, and
for all the Catholics watching, which I'm sure there's
trust us, we
tens of thousands.
We know what we're talking about, right? No, but then so you have your theology, right? So you could go teach in a Catholic, university. You could go on, even stay within the church. In a non-sacred office. Yeah,
what a way to boost up because the Catholics have a lot of universities. So rather than saying, well, I'm not going to go the priesthood route, I'm going to go the academic route, say, go the priesthood route and then go the academic route, right? And get married and be a professor and make your $120 a year, whatever it is. And like now you've got great professors leading your Catholic seminary colleges that have spent 10, 15 years deep diving on theology and actually practically applying it.
Yeah. So as Catholics, we just solved your big issue here.
Yeah.
That's episode 1, and that's even with a low-tier guest on your show. Imagine how good this podcast is going to be when you bring in the heavy hitters.
Duncan McLellan for the Archbishop of Minnesota North.
Unfortunately, he's married.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, so that's another thing to consider. But yeah, family size is a huge thing. But no, there's issues in our theology that we haven't worked through. And the other one that, kind of came to I think I'm in the right place on this, is what do you do about divorce, right? Jesus teaching on divorce, let man not separate. And I remember going to seminary, and they began by saying, well, let man not separate. Well, if your spouse has been unfaithful, it's okay to divorce them because of the faithfulness clause. But if you actually read the scriptures, Matthew 19, Mark 10, that talk about except for marital infidelity, what Jesus is locating is in a divorce, where does the adultery take place? And his conclusion is actually very simple, right? Is if adultery is the reason for the divorce, the adultery took place with the adultery. So the question is, why would Jesus care so much in a divorce situation about where adultery took place? Well, put yourself in first century, ancient Near Eastern world. There was a penalty for adultery, for the adulterer, for the guilty party. And the penalty was death, right? The woman brought before Jesus, and John, she's caught in the act of adultery. Law says we need to stone these people. So Jesus has a good reason for identifying where does the adultery take place. That's why he addresses it. But his teaching on divorce is let man not separate. In other words, second person or third person imperative, which we don't have in our language. They did back then. So we don't have the form of speech that Jesus is speaking in. The second person imperative is, tie your shoes, right? It's a command given in the second person. The subject implied is you. You tie your shoes. Clean your room. You clean your room. But
an imperative, right? In
Greek, they had a third person imperative, which was he tie his shoes. But we don't speak that way. Mm-hmm. And let man not separate. The English is trying to translate a part of speech that we don't have, a third person imperative.
So he's not just describing an Old Testament teaching. He is emphatically putting forth.
He is commanding the inability for us, let man not separate. Mm-hmm. So that's his teaching on divorce.
He's endorsing that teaching is what you're saying.
Let man not separate, correct?
Yeah.
Right, that is his teaching. And then he gets into what if they're unfaithful? Well, that's where the adultery took place. So the question is, so if there is a divorce, who do we stone? Mm-hmm. Right? So he's not giving an exclusion clause to who can divorce. He's identifying who do we kill? But when I went to seminary, they said, well, Jesus talks about, if there's unfaithfulness. So if your spouse is unfaithful, it's okay for you to divorce. Okay. Well, then you follow that line of thinking so some husband goes off on a business venture, has a one-night fling in a hotel. Oops, he's really, truly repentant. And that divorce is okay. But the husband who habitually comes home, knocks his wife down the steps every day and is just it's real, dangerous. Mm-hmm. You better not divorce him. Well, yeah. So if they're abusive, then that's got to be okay too. Well, then, and we actually followed this line of thinking at the flagship seminary was the, what if he's not physically abusive? What if he's verbally abusive? Verbally abusive just as bad, verbally abusive. Yeah. So if you don't call your wife fat, it's fine for divorce you. Then you get into, what about abandonment? Abandonment is the traditional understanding of abandonment is he goes off to war, right? And doesn't come back for 10 years and you never heard from him. Mm-hmm. Well, at some point, we're going to consider you not married because he's not coming home. So you can, but in the context of divorce, what is abandonment? Well, if they run off, you don't hear from them. Well, and then, okay, that's fine. But not all abandonment is physical. There can be emotional abandonment. And now you've taken let man not separate, which is a closed door on divorce. Mm-hmm. And now you've opened it up to, he doesn't care about my feelings enough. go ahead and get divorced, right?
So how are things going? Above or below a 5? Below? Okay, let's have a conversation about divorce.
Exactly. So now we've opened the door very, very wide to something Jesus is close. So we know what we're doing isn't right. But I think what we're afraid to say, and where I think Scripture comes down on, is divorce is never good, right? It's never, oh, good, you're going to get divorced now. Because it is an attempt to tear apart what God has joined together. Why would you do that? It is saying that God can't fix something. Your marriage is broken. God can't fix it. Well, if God can't fix your marriage, but he can fix you, what are you saying about God's character and nature? So it's claiming that we have authority to do things that we don't have authority to do. And it's saying God can't fix broken things. You don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Because if God can't fix a broken marriage, can God fix a broken you? So now we're getting into, what's God. So that's so the question is, divorce is never good, right? It's a bad thing because it's tearing apart what God joined together, and you're telling him he can't fix it. But you have to ask, is there a situation where divorce could be the lesser of two evils? Never good. We never say, good for you, you're getting divorced, or you should divorce. But where is it the lesser of two evils? And I kind of come down on this to say, look, even as someone's pastor, right? And we've been given supernatural knowledge the minute we become pastors, where we just know things.
Amen.
Right. As a church, if a couple is going through a situation where divorce is on the table for them, am I really in a position to say, I know where it's the lesser of two evils or not?
Mm-hmm.
Or should my role be to walk with them through the most difficult and painful decision they will probably ever make, and to walk with them through this knowing you are now, because you've somehow done away with wedded love and faithfulness, right? Your marriage, there's no good answer. And what does it mean to walk with a couple through that without telling them what they're doing is okay, but without telling them, I know what you should be doing?
Is there ever a time where you would endorse divorce, or more so you would endorse staying together but acknowledge their decision for divorce, right? Like, let's say it's a habitual abusive husband that's, very physically abusive, something like that. So one of the more worst case scenarios. In that case, would you say, yes, I think you should get a divorce? Or would you say, as a pastor, I know that God does not endorse divorce, but there may come a time where it's so severely broken that this is the lesser of two evils?
What I have done, and I've surprisingly positive response, is to mourn with them on this. It's by the time a couple comes to you,
mm-hmm.
right, or one of the couple comes to you, and they're not just trying to have pastor pick a side who's the right one here, right? Sometimes they play that game, and that's a dumb game,
mm-hmm.
right? We're not going to take one side against the other and let's bang on the other person.
Right, pastor?
Whose side are you? Come on.
Mm-hmm.
To say to them, you're coming to me and you're contemplating divorce, right? When you stood up there and said, I do, this is not where you saw it going, right? And let's just mourn and grieve that here was this marriage that in the beginning was this beautiful, wonderful Garden of Eden thing, and now we're here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're here. There is no good choice to make, right? And sometimes as verbalizing that to couples, you can see the weight fall off their shoulders because they're expecting the pastor to be like a pass-fail kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
where you're either going to condemn what they're doing or say what they're doing is okay. You condemn what they're doing, you never see them again. You tell them it's okay. They're like, then why does this hurt so much?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Couples, they're like, well, either I stay with the abusive husband or I get a divorce, right? Or the unfaithful wife or I get a divorce. And where they're like, oh, you should do this one and everything's going to be just fine. That's obviously not true.
Mm-hmm.
To say, wow, you're in a situation where there's no good answer. And I think as Christians, so many times we think when we're put in a situation, everything is a test and there's always a good and a bad answer, right? 90% of the time, that's not true. 90% of the time, there's either two good options, right? Do I, when we're done with this interview, do I go home and play with the kids outside, or do I make dinner? Like, well, they're both good. They're both fine, right? It's not a test. They're both good. Sometimes you get put into a difficult situation where, intruder breaks into my house. Do I shoot him, or do I let him rampage around and maybe hurt my family? Like, I don't want to shoot anyone.
Mm-hmm.
They're both bad options. But sometimes we're put in a situation where in a fallen world, there's no good choice. Very rarely is there one good choice and one bad choice. Those are easy, right? It's when you have two good options. Lord, thank you. Now, and then unfortunately, a couple comes to you, there's two bad options. I either divorce, which is bad, or I stay in a marriage where there's no wedded love and faithfulness, that we're not being Christ to the bride, and the bride's not being the bride to Christ.
Yeah. How's Lewis put it? He says, C.S. Lewis says, it's like a surgery to remove a body part, like to remove an arm. And everyone agrees that that's not ideal, and this is a terrible situation. Some doctors will try it, and some doctors won't try it. And that's kind of the different denominations will say, like, absolutely not. Some will say, this is ugly enough that we've got to give this a shot. It's the worst case. It's a terrible option, but letting the arm stay there is going to be just, even more damaging.
I mean, and I would argue that the bar is very high for when divorce is the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. Much higher than most people expect.
Much higher than most people expect. The question is, as pastors, is it our job to discern when it is and when it isn't?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have
our call.
It's
their call. We can only speak what the Bible says, or as you said, mourn with them. I think that's a really good tangible thing to do. Yeah. And probably good for anyone that, most people watching are not pastors, but many people watching will walk with somebody who's going through a divorce. And probably the good advice that you're saying is your job isn't so much to pick a side. Don't play that game because you're going to aggravate the situation, but mourn with the couple and say, this is absolutely terrible what you're going through. And if there's any way that we can save this, let me help you in that. But probably the best thing for most people to do is not just to become the person that one spouse comes to and lambasts the other spouse, and you egg it on and say, that's so terrible. He's so bad, or she's so,
Right. That doesn't
you're helping
anything.
hurt the situation.
Right. No. And it's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. It hurts the kids. Rarely it's the lesser, but sometimes it's lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
And so, what does it mean? We don't have time in the podcast for this. What does it mean to come alongside someone in that situation and not try to tell them, there's a book, Don't Sing Songs to a Heavy Heart. Don't tell them, this is, you're going to be just fine. Like, no, like.
What is it? A dirge, sing, what's the Bible verse? Sing melody when it was a dirge. I don't know. But maybe we can go this route. So yeah, we can't walk into all the details there. What are things for people to look for? What would be your best advice to somebody on how not to get divorced?
Be careful who you marry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, so I had my experience with doing pre-marriage counseling, more cons than pros. And I understand a lot of people are very, pro pre-marriage counseling. Like, you need to put them through 13 sessions and that's going to bulletproof their marriage. And like, cool story. Maybe you're very good at pre-marriage counseling and you can do that. And that's your gift and that's wonderful. And you should run with that. It's just be careful who you marry. Like, do you believe the same things about reality? Is your faith the same? Right? Because you have a different understanding of reality. It's very hard to share life with someone and move together as a couple. Again, making your small army in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly is, do you have they demonstrated? Because again, the key to marriage is faithfulness. Have they demonstrated fidelity or faithfulness when things have gotten tough, for example, or do they bail at the first sign of struggle? So for example, I would look at someone and say, let's look at their previous relationships. What caused those relationships to end? And is it they're always the one ending the relationship and going very quickly into the arms of another, boyfriend or girlfriend? Then, okay, that'd be a concern. What about their employment history when they have the first run-in with the boss, or they have the first difficult project, or the first, whatever, boom, they're looking for another job. They go to college and they went to 8 different colleges, and, have they demonstrated an ability to endure under difficult times? Because marriage is wonderful, it's great, and there's ups and there's downs. And what I want to know is, of course, anyone can ride the wave up here.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely do people get divorced or fall apart on their honeymoon, right? But it's when you're down here. So what happens when a spouse gets laid off? A spouse gets ill, seriously ill. What happens if they, all the other bad, hard things in life that happens? What happens when you're down here? Are they going to stick with it? And have they demonstrated an ability to persevere in other areas of life? Because if they have, then they're more likely to persevere down here than someone who always runs at the first sign of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we're followers of Jesus. Will God be their primary relationship? Will
Mm-hmm.
they put God over me? Right? Is their relationship with God more important than their marriage more important than I am?
Why is that so important? I agree with you. Why can you articulate why that's so important?
Because at the end of the day, my role as a husband is that when I die, my wife continues to follow Christ. Or if she predeceases me, that I can see her into the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's only possible if her relationship with Christ is more important than her relationship with me.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with my relationship with my kids. The only thing that matters for me as a dad is that when I'm gone, my kids follow Christ. It doesn't matter if I give them a big inheritance or we have a lot of fun together. That's all great stuff. But the only thing that matters is, will they follow Christ when I'm gone? In the same way, that's the most important thing for me in my marriage is this good for her and her faith? Because she's not mine. She's the Lord's. She's his property. I have been given the role of husband, which is a temporary role, a very important role, a very enjoyable role. But as a Christian, if I don't use that role to push her forward closer to her Savior, then I failed as a husband.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have all the good times together. We subdue the earth and fill it and all that. That's all well and good. But if I've pushed her away from Christ, I haven't done my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if that's your chief job, then you also want to enjoy life together, right? Be fruitful, enjoy life, multiply. So
that'll be the fruit of a good relationship with Christ. Right?
Yeah. So if enjoyment gets in the way of you or your spouse's relationship with Christ, cut it out. If enjoyment is helping along with that process, then good, right? Mm-hmm. If having a beer or a glass of wine with your spouse on a Friday night as you guys sit and talk through things is a good way for you guys to cultivate your relationship, to even talk about some different things relating to your faith or how that applied to your parenting and whatnot, great. Do that. Enjoy that. Yes. Great. If that's getting in the way of, or it's a distraction from, and it's keeping you from your growth in your Christian faith, time to talk about your Christianity and your vocation as parents and spouse, etc., then cut it out, even though it's probably a good thing, right?
Right. For example, if we're always going out with other couples and having fun with them, or hanging out with our kids, going out, but never have time to pray or to come together and do devotions together, then we need to free up time to do devotions. Mm-hmm. Not like obsessively, but regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. But again, that's a unique understanding of being a Christian husband or a Christian wife.
Mm-hmm. And once again, if you're a Christian and you take that seriously, and if you marry somebody who does not take that seriously, they're going to they're by the very definition, they have to have a different understanding of marriage, because they would not articulate what you just articulated, and a Christian should articulate what you just articulated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and again, you asked about finding a spouse. Find someone who wants you to do that for them. Mm-hmm. That when you bring up Jesus or going to church or reading a Bible or having devotions, they're not like, but they're like, yes, at least 9 times out of 10, mm-hmm. right? That this is something they want you to do for them.
Yeah. Any other interesting things to keep in mind as you're picking a spouse? Any statistics?
What do you have in mind?
I don't have anything in mind. I'm already married, so.
Yeah, no, I'd come back to be careful who you marry. Mm-hmm. That if the people who know you best have red flags for the person that you're considering, listen to them. Mm-hmm. They may not be right, but they probably are. Right. So that's, get the support of your tribe.
Yeah.
And get the support of their tribe too, because they may see things in you that you may be a great guy, you may be a great girl, but you may not be right for the person that you're pursuing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other things that came out of your MA thesis, your study of this, that you found was interesting?
The family size was really the interesting thing, and how when you look at the changing face of marriage, And you could argue too that it's, people are getting married later in life. Yeah, but they're living longer. So it's not, and it makes sense that they're delaying marriage they're done with school and they can get into that all makes sense. It really is the changing in family size as understanding of what it means. What are we going to do when we come together as husband and wife? Mm-hmm. And who then am I looking for? Right. I'm looking for someone that can raise 10 kids versus I'm looking for someone that I really enjoy spending time with.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Mm-hmm. All right. Any other things on marriage?
I think we've exhausted that topic.
Okay. Bennett, anything else?
Bennett, what do you think about marriage? Do you like marriage?
I'm in no rush. I love it, but I'm in no rush to get into it right now. Should I be? Should I be in a rush?
I got married at 32, and I wouldn't do it any different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 23, so I still have some time to think about it and really consider it.
I think I was 27.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the field, man.
There you go.
Just seeing how it goes for now.
Yeah. Well, I'm no longer a player. I'm a coach, so I wish you the best of luck. Yeah.
When you know, you know. All right. Well, we're getting close to out of time. I want to dive into, just wondering how much time we have to explore. Let's at least dabble with it. You've got a statement that you say all the time where you say, now is the best time to be a Christian.
There's never been a better time to be a Christian in our country, mm-hmm. right? And I have yet to have that thesis be disproven. And the reason why I say that is because when I was growing up, you had Christians over here, which were defined by what we didn't do, right? We didn't do drugs. We didn't have sex. We didn't do things. We didn't do risky things, right? And risky things bordering on fun things. So Christianity was more about saying no to things. And the world, right, the alternative lifestyle was to say yes to things. Go stay out late. Go party. Go have sex. Go do drugs. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Have more fun. And so it's in the marketplace of ideas, you're trying to sell saying no to things versus people are saying yes. Well, when you're not under the control and influence of the Holy Spirit, you want to say yes to things, right? So the pitch for Christianity was tough, right? But now the culture has shifted, no joke, right? From when I was growing up to now, to where if you listen to the culture isn't saying go out there and have fun and say yes to things. The culture is angry. The culture is making you feel guilty about who you are, right? For most people, you're an oppressor, right? The culture has abandoned the virtue of having fun for the virtue of being entertained, which ultimately is not fulfilling at all. The culture, again, is angry. It's looking to find fault, right? The cancel culture, where you're going to be defined by the worst thing you've ever done or by the worst thing people think you've done versus your achievements and accomplishments. Achievements and accomplishments are downplayed. There's no, in the culture, there's no encouragement for excellence. Excellence is shunned, right? Victimization is a virtue. That's not a world I want to live in. That's not compelling. That's not something that's interesting or exciting or inviting. And Christianity over here is saying, we don't define you by the worst thing you've ever done. We practice forgiveness. We practice love. We want to subdue the earth and fill the earth and subdue it. We want to get out there. We want to live the way God intended us to live. We want to achieve. We want to help people, right? We want to live with purpose and meaning and want to do it joyfully. Well, that's an easy choice. Mm-hmm. So I think if the world is becoming, he's over here, a darker and darker place. And I think it's important to attach, what does that mean, right? And if I'm a person of the world today, what am I living for? 79% of Gen Z identified as being lonely. I think it was 71% of millennials identified as being lonely. 50% of boomers identified as being lonely. This was before the pandemic in 2019.
Wow.
How many people today do you think identify as lonely? This worldview, you talked about people meant to be in community, Adam and Eve coming together, the nature of relationship is essential for humanity. This worldview is creating a culture where real relationship is difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, I love the idea of ideas have consequences. And it takes a little bit while for those ideas to show their real fruits. And I think what we've certainly seen in our age is, and we're going to have Adam Kuntz kind of speak to this a little bit here in not too long, but we've certainly seen that there were a lot of shifts over the last 150 years in the way that we approach reality, our understanding of all things, what the goal of humanity is. Great shifts in the last, or really bad shifts, but very monumental shifts in the last 150 years. It takes time for those fruits to really show what the results of those kind of thought processes are. Certainly the 60s would be a great example, right? There was a big shift in the 60s. Well, what's that going to do? Well, you start to see it, right? It takes a while. And there's no question that the way that secularism and culture has gone has made it so that our school, for instance, is exploding right now. Is it with all Christians who are saying we really want Christian education because we're really a Christ-centered family? Not necessarily. A lot of the people that are coming are saying we don't want anything to do with whatever's going on out here. This secular mindset is poison. We don't want anything to do with it. And you guys are doing something different.
They're looking at this and looking at the fruit going, I don't want this. Whatever the character may be. I mean, it's part of it's a character of like, just, I mean, but if you look at, so two things. If you look at what is the goal of this cultural lifestyle, if you look at functionally how, and again, characterization, like oversimplifying, how people are living, it's you wake up, you go to work, you knock off your responsibilities so that the goal of all that is to spend 2 hours on the couch with a screen on before you go to bed. That's the goal. If you can get to that point, you had a good day.
That's heaven. A little bit of entertainment. That's the best it's going to get.
Entertainment. That's a dumb goal to have. That's not why we were created. There's nothing wrong with being entertained. You had a long day. You're tired. You watch TV. Like, fine.
Had a 2.5 hour conversation with Duncan McLellan. Like, you need to
on a screen. But that's the goal. And that's the problem, is because that should not be the goal. The other thing to consider is changing culture, right? And this kind of takes us in a different direction. Why are all these changes happening? What's driving them? And I would argue it has to do with how we communicate. Right? So 3 times in human history, and again, oversimplifying, we've changed how we communicate from oral to written, right? With written, you get nation states, you get contracts, you get books, right? And everything changes. Then you go from, so written is, I can have an idea. Oral culture, I have an idea, I express it, and poof, whoever heard it has it, but then it's gone. Written, now I have an idea, I write it down. Now that idea can survive and be passed on to other people, right? Then we go from written, printing press, to printed. Now think about the changes that took place in the 1500s and the effects of those changes. From the 1500s, we changed the way we communicate, and now we can have an idea, we write it down, and we can mass produce that idea or thought or whatever and distribute it, to multiple people. So from that, you get the Reformation, the Renaissance. You get, arguably, down the road, you get the Industrial Revolution. You get democracy. You get things, obviously newspapers, books, magazines, all that. You get people becoming literate because now books are not that expensive. You can read. There's more to read, and more people can read. So you get the modern education, right? Or classical education, right? But you get education for the masses and all the changes that come from that, ultimately resulting in modernism. Which pros and cons. Now, for the 3rd time, we are changing how we communicate from printed to electronic, where now I can have an idea, and that idea can be not just reproduced, but distributed instantly for free to the whole world. And we are in the middle of this change in how we communicate. And I would argue that this change in how we communicate produced postmodernism. Because here, printed, I still am limited to the material that I can read, that I can absorb, that I can be influenced by, and that can shape my reality. Now, due to the magic of the internet, I have access to the sum total of all human knowledge and understanding and thought. That's a whole lot of information that I'm being forced to process at one time, right? So what I'm doing is, for the average person, they can't make sense of it all. So I'm going to take bits and pieces of this information and construct a worldview that works for me. But we're in the beginning of this change in how we communicate. Probably started, we can argue, maybe in the 80s, maybe the 70s, maybe the 90s, whatever, from printed to electronic. So we're in the middle of this change, and you have things like AI, all that. Where is this going to lead? I don't know, but I do know that every other time we've changed how we communicate, there's been a whole lot of change very, very rapidly. And I would argue we're still on the front side of this change. It's an exciting time to be alive because in this postmodernism worldview, where I now have infinite information, and I, as a person, have to parse what I believe in, what's true, construct a worldview around this that's semi-coherent. I'm trying to reconstruct this worldview. Now, the problem with the printed, what came out of the printed one, you ended up with modernism, which rejected the supernatural. Well, now with postmodernism, everything's back on the table.
Yeah.
Because the argument isn't, is it true? The argument is, does it work for me? And so you want to talk about angels and demons? You want to talk about the afterlife? You want to talk about God, Satan? You want to talk about the miracles that are in the Bible? That's all fair game, right?
Yeah.
As long as the average person taking it can produce a worldview from that information that works for them. The worldview that the culture has pre-produced, like kind of the standard model, like if you want the prefabricated worldview of the culture, you don't have to do it yourself. It's this one of, sitting on a couch, being entertained at the end of the day, of being angry, of being defined by the worst thing you've ever done, of not knowing your purpose, of all this. And Christianity can stand over here saying, we've already done the work for you on building worldview where all these things are on the table. Looks good, doesn't it? Which is why, circling back, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a Christian.
Yeah. I agree with you on a lot of fronts. We'll have to continue this conversation another time. If I can I want to tie this into one more plug for why this is important, because it fits into that. And it goes back a little bit to the way we communicate, to your point. So what's the strength of an oral culture? Well, if I'm sitting at John, the beloved disciple, and he's speaking to me, what if I was Polycarp, right? And I was able to be a disciple at John's feet for a decade. That's a way to learn. Goodness gracious, right? Just to sit there and ask him questions. Well, what did you mean when you said this, right? To be able to dialogue like that. Okay, that would be great. Now we can't do that, right? So what do we get? Now we get God's word. I don't want to minimize this by any means, but John had to take, in order to write and to pass down, John had to take all of this wealth of wisdom and fit it on a parchment. And I think he did it as potently as anyone possibly could, certainly with the work of the Holy Spirit, right? That's fantastic, right? Same with anyone else, right? If you were to write a letter, you take you have all this information in your mind, and you got to put it down with all these symbols and hope that the way that you articulate it, that when someone else reads it, they say, I got this. I got exactly what was going on in Duncan's mind, right? That's a tough way to communicate. Certainly not as good as someone being able to come and talk to you. Here is where this new technology, this internet, the video format, all of this, what this has brought back now is, let's say that you're the best person to speak on marriage in the entire country. If that's the case, you could write a book, in which case you got to go through the whole struggle of how do I get all of this wisdom up here and systematize it in a certain way and use the right words so that my audience, not only today, but 10 years from now when language shifts slightly, that they'll be able to properly understand what's in my mind. That can work. It's not the best way. What's the best way to be able to come and sit and talk with you? So once again, why is this potent? Why is this needed? Because I do think that with technology, a lot of pitfalls that you could fall down, but also what a great opportunity to be able to sit and give people the opportunity to just use their spoken language to try to articulate to the best of their ability in a way that's much easier than trying to write a book, that which is present in their mind, right? What a great, and ideally people can walk alongside this. And one last point with that is, to your point, if Christianity is the best idea on the market, and without a doubt, I believe that to be the case, and I think it shows it over and over, well, that in these long-form discussions, it will show itself, right? Right thought is beautiful, and you can just sense it. And watching well-formed Christians speak about what God has ordained and created and what his purpose is in all of these different areas of life, that will shine out, I believe, when it's compared to a secularist trying to talk about these things. It will just shine that much brighter. And therefore, I do think that over time that these ideas will win out. Good ideas do win out. Because once again, they're based in truth. They're not based in deception. So,
very good. Thank you for having me on, Brian.
Yes. So if anyone wants to learn more from you, Duncan, where do they go?
That's all I got.
That's all you got. Is there any social media? Should they just go to this church, Trinity Lutheran Church?
TrinityWaconia.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole treasure trove of materials up there. If you want a thesis on the theology of marriage, go to TrinityWaconia.org. Find the link to email us and ask for it, and I can send you a PDF copy. Just if you can find the spelling mistakes, there's 5 of them, you win a prize.
Bennett's already begun.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Cheers and God bless.